Hi, welcome back. If you're interested in learning a little bit about photo retouching, you've come to the right place. So for today's video, we're going into my classroom once again, a photography classroom, where we're going to learn how to do some photo retouching. And here on the screen, you can see some examples that students have created over the years. This is a great way to preserve your family memories and digitize them, add a little bit of color. So here we go. So we're going to open Little Old Boy Before, and you're going to see a little boy and it's an old photo. So everybody needs to get to this point to open this. And this is not me. I've answered this question for years. People asked if it was me. I think this is some kid from like the 1950s or 60s. I was not born yet. I'm not that old. This is not me. This is a photo I found on the internet where someone was teaching, I think it was part of a course. They were teaching a course in photo retouching, and I thought this has just about every problem that we would have with an old photo, so it makes a good place for us to practice. So we've got this boy, and the first issue is that the photo is torn in half, so it was scanned in two pieces. I would say most of you are not going to have the issue where you have to scan pieces of an old photo and put them back together, but if you do, we're going to start by doing that. The next thing that you may notice is that even though we would say that this is not a color photo, it doesn't look like a black and white photo. So for a long time, people would take a black and white photo and they would tone the photo with brown tones. And the brown tones are called sepia or sepia. I'm not sure. I call it sepia just because that's what I call it. And that's a type of brown paint. And they would stain the photo with that brown color so that instead of having a black and white photo, which sometimes looks very cold, you had warmer tones and it looks nicer for portraits. It also was a process that treated the paper in a way that it would last longer. So old photos that were toned would last longer. They'd be more archival. So if you've ever gone to Great America and you've gone to the Old West area and dressed up like a saloon girl or a cowboy or something, you know what I'm talking about? And they take those photos, you know, they're brown. That's what they're doing, making them look sort of old and vintage. The point of that is if you have a black and white photo, you should still scan it as a color document. And the reason for that is that the scanner will do a better job getting more detailed information if you lie to it and you tell the scanner that it is a color image. If you scan in black and white or grayscale, it only scans one channel, gray. If you scan in color, it scans in three channels, red, green, and blue. So a lot of times you get information on one channel, you lose it on another. So we want to scan these as color images even though they're not. Once they're scanned, we don't want to be looking at this. If you look really close at my image, you can see it's kind of pink here and then it's kind of green. There's color in this image. We want to get rid of that. Now the first thing you do before you start anything in Photoshop is you have the original document. You want to protect the original. So let's go ahead and do that by copying the background layer. We're going to go to our background layer. We're going to drag the background layer to the new layer icon and let go. The new layer icon's next to the trash can. Drag it to the new layer icon and let go so that you have a copy of the original and that we're not affecting the original image. If you don't do that and you make a mistake, I'm going to say to you, oh, sorry, you need to start over. And you're going to need to go scan again and start the whole process. So we always want to do that because if we do need to go back in time all the way back to the bottom, you can do it because you got the original down here in the bottom. Okay? All right, next step. We're going to take the image and turn it grayscale. So now that we've got all the information, we don't want to be looking at all those distracting color things that are going on. So go to Image at the top of the screen, go to Adjustments, which is the second one down, and choose Desaturate, which is almost near the bottom. Desaturate will take that copy of that layer that we just made and turn it into a black and white photo. Next step, we're going to adjust the levels a little bit. Now, in terms of coloring, you cannot color black and you cannot color white, but you can color everything in between. So you don't want to make your image really high contrast where it's very black and very white, because when you add the color to it, it won't really show up. So we're going to go ahead and go under Image and Adjustments with that in mind. So Image Adjustments, Levels, having this in mind that we want to make the photo look better because it has faded over time, but we don't want to get carried away with black or white. So let's go ahead and take the black slider in just a little bit. We don't want to go all the way to where this mountain starts because that just seems like it's getting too dark. Let's go to about 26. So you see when you drag this middle black slider right here, when you drag that in, this number changes. If you want to just type in the number 26, you can do that. We're not going to mess with the white. I don't want to brighten this up at all. I want to leave not a lot of white in the image, I guess. And then the middle slider you can drag to the right just a couple clicks to about 0.90, and what that will do is that will just darken it a little bit. I think we want to see a lot of those tones, so I'm kind of taking some of the white out of the equation, improving the contrast a little bit, but not getting too carried away. So we got 26, 0.90, 255. Go ahead and click OK. And then I'm going to zoom out. The next thing that we're going to do is actually something you can skip entirely if you don't have a photo that's torn in half. And that is, we're going to pick up this left side, this left piece of this pie here, and we're going to drag it over and put the kid's face back together. So we're going to do a little digital plastic surgery here. The tool that you would use to do this is a tool that I would never use for anything except what we're about to do. So it's kind of a waste, but the magnetic lasso, it's called the magnetic lasso. It is hidden underneath the lasso tool, and the lasso looks like a cowboy's rope that he would use to get some cattle. If you hold down the lasso tool, you can change to polygonal lasso tool or the lasso tool we haven't used before called the magnetic lasso tool. That's the one we're going to use today. So the magnetic lasso tool, don't ever use this for anything. It doesn't really work for much, but it does work for this. If you take the magnetic lasso tool and you click on an edge, and what I mean by an edge is the edge of this tear where the paper is torn. If I click on it, it drops an anchor point. Once I drop the anchor point, I don't need to click anymore. I'm just going to start to move along. Notice what's happening here. As I'm moving along that edge, it's sticking to the edge and it's dropping these little points. Now the problem with this is sometimes it gets caught and you start to do that and it's like, oh no, what's happened? And you start to move around and you get this sort of thing going on here. If you want to abort the mission completely, you hit escape and you start over. But if you're like almost done and that happens, I'll show you how to back out of it. So as those little things are dropping, as those little sticky points are dropping, if it does kind of go crazy a little bit, you can hit the delete key on the keyboard and just slowly back up your mouse until you get back on track, and then you can continue on your way. So I'm going to go ahead and continue on my way with this sticky lasso tool. If it sort of misses a little bit, it's okay. This does not have to be perfect. It's just got to be kind of close. The next step, once you have that top left section selected, is you're going to hold Command on the keyboard and press the letter J, as in jump. So Command J, and what you'll see is that a new layer will appear in the Layers palette after you do Command J, and it will be that selection. So what we basically did is we copied the selection and we pasted it to a new layer. That's what Command J does. Anytime you want to take a piece of something from a layer and copy and paste it real quick, you select it in Command J and it does that. So you should have 3 layers now. Okay, the next step is we're going to use the Move tool, and the Move tool is just the arrows. We've used this since day 1. And you're going to take the Move tool, you're going to move this face over to reconnect it. You do want to leave a little space between where that crease is. You can't do this. You can't be like, well, I gotta put this way over here so we don't see the tear. Now his eyes are too close together and he doesn't have a nose, and you're making a lot more work for yourself than you needed to. So when something tears, it doesn't tear clean. It's not cut, it's torn. So it's down here, and I'm trying to get close, but not to where it distorts his face. So we're trying to figure out about where that goes. I would say it looks like that. There's still kind of an X across his face, but that's okay. The next step, because now when you zoom out, you're going to notice that you have this extra like little thing off to the side there, and you got the extra space around there. We're going to clean that up real quick by cropping it. So you're going to select the area you want to keep and click Image, Crop, and then we want to deselect, Command D. All right, the next part that we do need to focus on is cloning to fix the photo. All the way at the top, we have 3 layers right now. We want a 4th layer that's at the top of the stack. So let's go ahead and just click this little symbol right here to give ourselves a new layer. So click on the layer thing next to the trash can to give yourself a new layer. I'm going to go ahead and find this tool right here. Some of you have used it, some of you have not. It's the clone stamp. It looks like a little stamper tool. It's sandwiched in between these 2 brushes. So go ahead and click on that. Now we're going to look at the top of our screen, and I need you to make yours look like mine. So I'll go through this step by step with you. First of all, we don't really want to use a size 50 clone stamp. That's way too big. You probably want to use right around 10. Between 10 to 20 is about the size you typically want to clone with. So let's go with like 14 or 15 right now. As far as hardness, I don't like to use the clone stamp tool as a really soft edge, and I don't like to use it as a really hard edge. I like to use it sort of as a kind of hard edge. So we're going to go like probably about 70% hardness. So we got a 15 or 14 pixel brush. We've got 70% hardness. You have to always make sure that the mode is normal. If your clone stamp tool stops working at some point or weird things start to happen, this probably shifted from normal to something else, abnormal. The opacity for right now is going to be 100 because I want you to see how this works, but you're going to adjust this pretty frequently. You're going to move the opacity, and what that means is how much do you want the clone stamp tool to work. So this would be the equivalent to like, well, I need a sledgehammer. I want this thing to like happen right now versus, you know what, I want to kind of do this gradually and work at it a little bit. So you're going to change that. For now, let's leave it at 100. This has to be checked. Where it says aligned sample, make sure it's checked. And then where it says all layers, yours might say current layer. That's wrong. Change it to all layers. So if yours says current layer, change it to all layers. And that's it. That's really all you have to worry about with the clone stamp tool. Now the nice thing about this is if you do it right, if you make a new layer before you start, you can make all the mistakes you want because we can always get back to the original. You don't ever have to worry about mistakes because it's all happening on its own layer. Here's how it works. You hold Option on the keyboard, and when you hold Option, we're going to fix this little dart hole here. Somebody threw darts at the kid's picture or ripped it or shot a BB gun at it or something. I don't know. We're going to hold Option. It turns into a target. And what it's saying is, okay, what do you want to target? And what we want to target are some of the pixels around this damage. We don't want to copy the damage. We want to copy the good stuff. So I'm going to hold Option, and I'm going to click one time just outside of this little damaged area. So I hold Option, I click once, and I let go of Option. Now I'm going to come up here. Now when I come up here, what's going to happen is when I start to click, it's going to take the pixels from where that little plus is, and it's going to cut and paste them or copy and paste them onto the damaged area. Now if you just go crazy and you do this all in one shot, it's probably going to look bad. So you want to do something called resampling, and what resampling means is you just go back to Option again and you get some different pixels. So now I'm going to take some of these. Option, click here, let go, click a few times here. Option, click up here, and then come over here and click a few times. So you're sort of surrounding it, and it's like you're kind of like shrinking the damage. So I've got it surrounded. Option click, 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 click. Option click, 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 click. And this should sound like a newspaper reporter's office in here. It should be a lot of clicking. Like if you walked in and there was 100 people typing things, you would hear all those little clicks. Cloning should not be silent. And what I mean by that is you don't want to do this. Watch what I'm about to do here. I'm going to option click, and some people like to go option click, let go, and then they start smudging stuff around. Now what's happening is I'm creating a different problem. And that problem is that I can kind of see what I've done right there. It's subtle, but I can still see it. I'm going to fly through mine really quick, and then I'll be available to help people with their thing. So you know how you get copyright strikes when you put other people's music on your like stuff and you post it online? I was wondering today if you would get a copyright strike if you put like a Beethoven symphony as your background music. Because it's several hundred years old. All right, let's move on to the to a couple of the tricks that you need to know. So the first one is how do we get rid of this? This is terrible right here. Like I see this like weird line that looks like, even if I didn't know that this photo was damaged, I would still be able to see that slight little change in value on the top and the bottom, and that's going to cause people to look at that area. So what you want to do is grab a brush that is bigger. So we're going to make a brush that's probably around 90 pixels. Now what we're going to do is we're going to change the edge of that brush and make it softer. So I want the hardness of that brush to be, instead of 80, I want it to be around 20. And then for the opacity, we want to turn that way down to about 15 or 20. So I've got opacity at 15, an 80 pixel brush with a 20% hard edge. So I have a soft brush at a low opacity, basically. And I want to show you how this is going to matter. Watch my screen here. You're going to still do the same thing. You're going to option click up here, and I'm going to take some of these darker pixels, and then I'm going to let go, and I'm going to pull them down in this direction. And then I'm going to come down here and take the lighter ones, option click down here, and then I'm going to pull them up in this direction. So what I'm doing is I'm sort of fading the edge. Option click here, click a few times, option click here, click a few times, option click here, click a few times, down here. We're trying to fade that edge. So now I would say if you were looking at this, you would have a hard time knowing what this looked like before. And you're usually not going to show somebody, oh, look at what it looked like before. They're only concerned with what it looked like after. So you're trying to disguise that edge by cloning with a soft, large brush at a low opacity. And you take a little bit and you're almost like mixing up or stirring up the pixels so that we can't see any sign of that scratch that was there before. The other thing that I want you to know, because this is like your safety button here, so you can just go, oh, this wasn't working out. Don't be afraid to do what I'm about to do here. If things are going badly, this looks good, I'm happy with it, so I don't want to permanently do this. But if things are going poorly, rather than try to fix it and start to, you're cloning all over the place and you're trying to get this thing back on the rails, but it's a lost cause. If you think it's terrible, take the eraser tool and you can just erase whatever you did. That's why we made a new layer. Look what's happening here. I'm erasing this and it's going back to the original. So if I'm like, I did a terrible job, I'm starting over, I would just erase the entire layer or erase part of it. Okay? You could also take a peek at how you're doing, and the way you take a peek at how you're doing is you poke it in the eye. You find this layer here that has all your fixing on it, and you poke it in the eye, and you go, oh, what did it look like before and after? I'm doing a pretty good job. I'm proud of myself. I'm patting myself on the back. Yay. So here we go. We've got the kid open. It's day 2. We've got a layer that is on the top, and that layer on the top is what you are fixing everything on. So in order to fix things, we're using the clone stamp tool. Generally speaking, you want the clone stamp tool to be pretty small. You don't probably want this at 100%, especially when you're working on something like a face. But if you're working on something that really doesn't matter all that much, like a background or the chair, the bench or his shoes, something that isn't going to attract a lot of attention, you want to have this more toward 100. For something like the face, where you want to make sure you get it right, you want to have it more toward like 20 or 30. The edge of the brush, the hardness, I have mine at 78%. I think that's a pretty good place to be. And I would say you would want to zoom in most of the time. And basically what we're doing is using the clone stamp tool to pick up good pixels and put them down where the bad pixels are. So earlier today we had an interesting talk about this type of work, and some people were saying, you know, oh, I don't mind doing this, or you know, somebody else was like kind of weird and they're like, oh, I love doing this, I could do this all day. But that is not the typical view on this, and what we were kind of talking about is I was looking through the past like 5 or 6 years of these, like people's projects, and I noticed a trend as a group. There were still some good ones every year, but as a group they get progressively worse. Like when they started in like 2006, 2005, they're like really good. And then I started looking at some of the old photos from last year and the year before that and the year before that, and they're getting progressively worse. And I asked everyone why they think that they're getting worse, and what do you think they came up with? Why are these getting worse? Yeah, not so much the quality of the pictures is deteriorating over the last 5 years. I think it's the people's approach to it, like the mentality of the people working on it, where it seems like fewer and fewer people are willing to really put in a lot of work for something that takes a lot of time to learn how to do, or something that's difficult. You guys find yourself like when you're like, oh, I'm going to try to do this, and then you're like, oh, it's too hard, I'm not doing this. Or it takes too long, I'm not doing this. I think I'm seeing that is becoming the trend. And a lot of the stress that is put onto you in your life, in school and work and everything is sped up for you guys way more than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Like you're supposed to hurry up, and you're rewarded for being done first or being the fastest at something. And the quality has kind of fallen apart because everything's moving too fast. So the group of people that are doing stuff like this that requires some patience and concentration and craftsmanship, that group of people is shrinking. So it's becoming more and more difficult to find people that can do certain things. But let's start with the hair. Here's what you need to be careful of when you're cloning somebody's hair, when you're fixing a photo in somebody's hair. First of all, you can use a little bit bigger brush because the hair is just a bunch of random patterns. And I guess the only way that you could ruin the hair is if you repeat the same pattern too often. What I mean by that is if you have like this piece right here, and I clone this piece here, and then here, and then here, and then here. So if I'm cloning the same thing, it looks like somebody gave him a weird haircut, right? When you start to repeat these patterns, this is bad, because what you're doing is you're attracting my eye to an area unnecessarily. So I don't want to see any of this stuff that I'm like, oh, it looks the same over here as it does over here. So you want to be careful of that. Other than that, it's pretty easy. It's pretty straightforward to fix the hair. All right, moving down. You definitely want to turn the opacity down on the clone stamp tool when you're working on someone's face. I've got mine turned down to right around 20% is good. I've seen people that are more comfortable even under 20%. And the part that you really need to understand about this is what I'm about to tell you now. When you take a photo of someone's face, or you take a portrait of someone, you draw a portrait of someone, you paint it, if you've ever done something like that, if you change the pattern of lights and darks on someone's face, it doesn't look like them anymore. So you can see that if this tear wasn't here, this is probably the lightest part of the forehead. There's a highlight right here, which means that that is where it sort of comes toward you. It protrudes out. If I change how dark or light this is, it's not going to look like this person anymore, which is bad. Or it's going to look like they were injured in some sort of tragic accident, like he had a dent in his skull or something. So you want to be really careful to stay really close to the area that has damage, and that's why we turn the opacity so far down. So you can see I'm taking just a little bit of forehead color from here, and I'm sort of fading out the damage. Even if you leave a little slight amount of the damage visible, that is better than changing the appearance of the person. Because whoever is having you do this for them is most concerned with preserving who that person was. Now another thing is people start to get closer and closer and closer like this, and you're like, okay, yeah, I really want to make sure I do a good job here. So I'm zoomed in 3,200%, and I don't even know what this is anymore. So I'm going to show you how you can use this to your advantage. There's a way that you could be zoomed in this close and still see what you're doing, almost like having a rear view mirror picture. You're going to have a second window. And the way that you do this, let's go ahead and do this part together, everybody. Go to Window at the top and go to Arrange, which is also at the top. Window, Arrange. And then you're going to go over and down to where it says New Window. And it's going to say New Window for whatever document you have open, and click on that. So what happens is the kid shows up again. Here he is. Now, the deal is, when you do this, you can be zoomed in this close over here, and then maybe zoomed in like about that much over here so that we could see his face, right? So I want you to watch this area right here while I work on this window over here. Does that make sense? So we've got two windows, same document. Watch what's going to happen here. If I start to work really zoomed in, you can watch and see what I'm doing. Do you see his nose changing there? So while I'm working this close, and I'm like, well, this doesn't look right. Well, I wonder what that is. I'm going to try to like smooth this out, and when I'm doing that, I use a little bit bigger brush, I can actually see if I'm doing a good job. There's that shadow. And then I'm going to smooth this out and get this all to even out here. You see that happening? So having two windows is a great way to be able to get really close up and then also be able to see what it is you're doing, right? Now I know I'm fixing that area, and I keep looking back and forth. Like I'm working over here, but I'm watching over there. There's another thing that we can take advantage of. It's called sample painting. And sample painting means there are no good pixels to clone. Like over here it looks like a QR code or some Space Invaders or something. I don't know what's going on, but there's really nothing here that is useful. So what you can do is airbrush parts of the skin color over the face and soften the damage before you try getting rid of it entirely. So watch this area over here that looks like a really terrible cold sore or something. If you take the paintbrush, because you don't have any good pixels, and the paintbrush is relatively small, and it's at a really low opacity, like under 20%. So I got it at 12%, and it's a really soft brush. It's 0% hardness. Watch what that's going to do to it. I'm going to pick up by holding Option. You could still hold Option when you have a paintbrush, and what it does is it actually picks up the color of this gray. So when I hold Option, you can see I'm picking up or changing the color. So I'm going to get that color gray, and I'm going to spray it over the damage. So what I'm doing is taking those pixels and making them not as high contrast. I'm softening the damage, softening, until it's not as bad, right? Like it's okay now. like I'm going to take that, and I know there's a shadow right here, so I'm going to darken this area. This is going to prevent you, if you clone, sometimes you make a bad move and it's like, oh man, it's like really terrible. What I'm doing here is making the pixels have less contrast, so you could see in my new window, I've softened that area and it still looks like he has a nose. So taking a new view is one thing. Sample painting is switching to a paintbrush and using it like an airbrush to fix the damage a little bit at a time. And then you go back to your clone stamp tool and you're like, okay, I'm going to grab some of that and I'm going to go ahead and fix this up.
Thanks for watching. Like, there's like a little button that they put on the laptop or something, and then they say click it, and then you can never even miss a video.
That's if you subscribe.